going from Zoom to YouTube. All right, good morning. So Seer and Higher Self Guidance, global morning. So wanted to do one in the morning just because the transmission or the frequency around us is quiet, and then we can kind of see what comes through the heart, basically, in this early morning. All right, so I just got a message saying the sound is good, so that's great. I'm just confirming. Okay. Um, so what seems to come through, so every day, so whenever I do, not every day, but when I do the lives, well, I guess every day or all the time, kind of what comes through, kind of what I'm seeing with kind of everyone around me is this negotiation, right? So everybody wants to end their suffering. They want to not have nightmares at night. They want to have good relationships with people. They want to fall in love, like true love. And I just looked at the chat. Helen is here. Hello, Elaine, listening from work. Happy to be here. Okay, thanks, Helen. I'm going to send you some love. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay. Um, and then, so what everybody wants, what the light workers want, so the sensitives, the empaths, the black sheep, the starseeds, the people that know there's more to this earth material plane than they have been told. And they've always seen things, they've always kind of known things, but not known. Maybe they do know, depending on how conscious the caretakers or the parents were when they were growing up, and then how many awakened others they had around them. And if they were like the only one and then they were the only child, it was very lonely and it was very confusing, right? So now we're kind of getting out of the confusion and finding out, okay, so what is going on, essentially, right? What is going on? And there's lots of things going on. So as soon as you start asking questions, you start seeing different layers of things. And then and there's lots kind of happening, right? So my glasses are foggy, which means, do I really want to see? Do we really want to see? Do we really want to see how things actually are? Or do we want to stay with that kind of haze or film over our eyes? Because it's painful and over our third eye. And do we want to see things as they are? Okay. And then do we want to end our suffering? But there seems to be a negotiation, and I include myself in the negotiation. There seems to be a negotiation that in order to end your own suffering and to become aware of what is actually going on and what is actually happening in the 3D material plane, we have to name things as they are, not as we want them to be, right? So the people pleasing or the fantasy or the dissociating or the pretending things are better than they are, or that the person will improve in the future, you know? What happens in the future is people usually get worse. They don't get better. And if they do get better, it has to be because they chose to, and they put an immense effort into their awakening and consciousness. So it doesn't come just because you feel like it. Okay. So the material 3D plane, what some people call the matrix or the trickery that happens in the 3D plane, the 3D plane lives off suffering. So the material plane needs you to suffer, and they don't need everyone to suffer. They don't need the non-player characters that are either not activated at all or empty and they're made. So they're not in a human body with a soul, with a higher self. They're made. Okay, so that's one shocking realization of the material plane. But I remember in my 20s looking at people driving and saying, that is not a person. That it to me, they look not like a ghost. That's kind of how we've been told to, describe things as a ghost so that it seems more like fantasy, like it's not, you're just kind of making stuff up. It's a fantasy. But what I would see is the emptiness, the lack of the heart-based being, the soul, the higher self. And then I would see, and this happened from when I was young, I would see people and they would look like a lizard or an alligator or a crocodile or um and once I could see it, I couldn't unsee it. But I didn't understand what I was seeing. And I didn't want to judge. I felt like I was judging the person or I was judging. Anyways, I didn't want to judge. And so it feels like a no glasses time. I feel like my glasses are irritating me and I have to take them off because I'm talking about seeing things as they are. And so when you start seeing kind of people as they are and people that look like people, like anytime I've done any remote viewing of seeing to other planets or other areas of the universe, the it felt sad. Like anytime any beings or any robots, I guess, or any beings that are being made to look like human beings, to me, how it felt is it felt very sad and it felt very empty. And so if you find yourself around people and you feel very sad around them, or you feel that they're very empty, but because they're your mother, your brother, your sister, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, you don't want them to be that way because you want connection. You want a heart to heart based connection. And usually, you're going to be the target and you're going to be decimated in those relationships unless you see people the way they are. And it is actually really hard. It isn't hard to see as they are. What is hard is accepting that they are the way they are and that you cannot change it, that you are powerless and you cannot change it. So as I said that, a crow flew over the window overhead. So it's really hard to accept that you cannot change other people. And I see my friends, like myself at different times in my life, turn themselves inside out for the people that I would call that have an active addiction. And they don't want them to have an active addiction. They want them to not be an alcoholic. They want them not to be addicted to cannabis. They want them, to stop escaping. And so they pour all their energy into that person. And then sometimes they're not even in a relationship. They're in a relationship. They're friends. They're not like husband and boyfriend and wife and whatever. They're not partners, they're friends. And so they're pouring in, the empath will pour into that person, like wanting them to stop drinking, wanting them to stop doing drugs, wanting them to stop trying, to destroying themselves because it makes their life chaotic because they can't handle the chaos. But they can't set any boundaries with a person in active addiction because they feel sorry for the person, because the person has had trauma. 3D is trauma. 3D is trauma, and we are given that show, by the, empty entities, the NPCs on Instagram and YouTube of like, oh, I have money and I just travel and I'm a billionaire and I'm a billionaire's daughter. And, there's this one couple billionaires' daughters on TikTok, and it's like, what are you doing on social media? You like basically run your families. Like one is a Rothschild, pretty much runs the world financially, owns the banking system pretty much. And they're the offspring are like on TikTok and on social media saying, my life is like this. And it's like, stop, stop it. Like, stop showing a fake 3D. 3D is carnage. 3D is painful. 3D is confusing. And you, as an empath, as a light worker, are the answer. But you're treated like garbage because they need you to not see that you're the answer. It's your energy. It's your essence. It's your source spark that 3D is after, because 3D cannot function without you willingly giving your energy and going to the lowest denominator, which is the baseline for 3D, which is fear. So 3D needs you as the light worker to be in fear or in chaos or running around trying to save people that you cannot save. You can't. I've done it. I've wasted years doing it. It doesn't work. And I was told by my teachers, especially Eckhart Tolle, in the 90s, like 1997 to 2000, when he was my teacher, that it doesn't work like that. Like that everyone, every soul that incarnates on Earth in 3D has to awaken on their own and choose for themselves. And you cannot bring other people into the awakening process. And it takes a lot of strength to admit the truth and to admit things as they are and not how you want them to be. And so I'm seeing my friends, some of them really struggling with addictions, and I consider codependency the worst addiction of all for light workers. And this whole thing that we've been told, like if you sacrifice yourself and if you give all of your resources, to those in the family that are asking for them because they need help, that it's going to help them. And all it's going to do is it's going to drain you and impoverish you. And then when you need help, there is nobody there. And that happens to light workers. When they need help or when they get sick, nobody is helping them. And actually, there's lots of people around wanting them to die. Because once you get weak, then they want to take over your energy because you're weak and you're not able to kind of see what's happening to you. And that's 3D. And once you start awakening and making connections to everything, then you think, okay, well, life will get easier. But really, the awakening process is painful. And that's why many people choose not to, because you're basically saving your own life. And there's this kind of emphasis from childhood if they're when an empath is born or a light worker is born, there's like, I call them like handlers, but they might have like names like dad, mom, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, cousin, but they are not there for your highest and greatest good. And they're there to kind of cause harm so that you are kind of broken even before you become an adult. And that is the norm in 3D. And so everybody wants to say that is not the norm. It is, because they need you to not know who you are. They need you to be confused, and they need you to give away your energy and stay at a low level of fear and to not shift from fear and not shift from shame and not shift from sacrificing yourself. So there's a lot of negotiation as you're awakening from 3D to 4D to 5D. There's a lot of negotiation that happens. Well, can I bring this person with me? Can I bring alcohol with me? Can I bring cannabis with me? Awakening is a deconstruction process. You're deconstructing the false self. You're deconstructing the false installations that are in your system that are not from your original design from source. Your original source spark does not have interference. Your original source spark sees everyone as equal. And so knowing they would never want you to sacrifice yourself, because they wouldn't sacrifice themselves, because then that would be like sacrificing their source spark. And so there's this negotiation of, well, how many drinks can I have? How, alcohol is fun. I had someone recently say to me, Joe Dispenza like loves, alcohol, and he loves expensive wine. And so he tells people, well, there's consequences. You're going to have a hangover if if you indulge and you kind of binge drink. And I'm like, it's a lot worse than that. While you're having fun for some time, then you exit your body, because that's what happens with alcohol. It works like it ejects you, and cannabis, they eject you out of your body. And then if you're out of your body, who comes into your body? Right? And that's why they make, oh, entities are so scary and they happen to others and they're just like, it's so confusing what happens. No, it's not confusing. Okay, you go out of your body, something else comes into your body. That's not confusing. It's that simple. It's that straightforward. And whatever is coming in your body, like the archons, what were called the archons in the Gnostic teachings from 2000 years ago, the Gnostic teachings were there to help us awaken and to help us remove interference from ourselves and our field so that we can awaken out of 3D and 4D. And they were like, it was like a light, like these are pointers. This is what the material plane looks like. It was called the demiurge. And this is how to awaken from it. So this negotiation, but they're suffering, right? Like I can see, my friends are suffering, right? Like they're suffering, right? But they still want to party. They still want, to go into the darkness and, not get harmed. But as soon as you go in the darkness, you do get harmed because you lose one of your main senses, you're seeing, because it's dark, there's no light. And so there's this negotiation of, well, how much alcohol can I have? How much cannabis can I have? And how come when somebody that is on a lot of cannabis or somebody that is on a lot of alcohol, how come you can't reach them? How come they do like, they do bizarre behaviors and say horrible things? Like they say horrible things. Like, and then they're like, but you're not, you're not there for me. You're not there supporting me. It's like, okay, well, how much do you support somebody that constantly goes into an abusive situation. And they think they're in control, and they think that it isn't a problem. Like, how much do you enable somebody? How codependent are you going to be? Because they're getting harmed, but then they're harming you. And then they're disrespecting you, and they're disrespecting your time, because they're just like, well, you have to help me because I'm getting decimated over here. You know, it's like, I don't know, why don't you stop getting decimated over here? And then actually appreciate the people that are conscious, that are doing their own work, that are aware, because as soon as somebody is in a codependent situation where they're trying to save addicts, they're seeing them from their higher self, and they're saying, well, but from their soul point of view, from their higher self point of view, like, this isn't who they are. It's like, yeah, yeah, yes, that's true. But in this moment of active addiction, the addiction will win. The addiction always comes first. So if you're in a family environment and you grew up with an alcoholic parent or a drug addicted parent, you know that alcohol and drugs came first. That if it was between feed the family and have food in the house or buy alcohol, you will buy alcohol, or they will buy alcohol or drugs. Like, the addiction always comes first, because it's like a beast that needs to be fed, because it is like an entity installation inside that needs to be fed. And it needs to be fed pain and drugs and alcohol, the lowest level of consciousness on earth, the lowest emotions, fear, and alcohol and drugs. Like they say, the angry cocaine addict or the happy drunk, you know, or the miserable, or he was fine, but then, he gets so violent when he drinks. It's like, or the ones that say they can handle it. It's like, oh yeah, ask the people how it feels being around you. Your moodiness, your sarcasm, your secrecy, like hiding, how much you're drinking. And then usually there's like other things like hiding money, hiding alcohol. And also the whole schedule revolves around alcohol. Like, I had a friend and he was fully alcoholic, like fully an alcoholic, and obsessed, I would say, with alcohol. And then super knowledgeable about all of the different kinds of alcohol, and especially wine. And so he was, like a wealthy alcoholic. And, it was miserable. It was like his addiction was first always, and had to be back home at a certain time because they have to drink, because, they don't want to spend money outside for how much they need to drink. And so they have, they get a lot more alcohol if they go home, but they don't want to be by themselves. So they need other people around. And it just goes on. So I'm seeing that a lot right now, this negotiation with alcohol, this negotiation with cannabis. And you have to ask yourself, who's in charge of your own body, your own soul, your own essence, your own God spark, or source spark, or divine presence spark. And when there are people around you that are in active addiction, they know what they're doing. And they are hoping that your bleeding heart will keep bleeding, and that you will keep, taking the excuses, and you're gonna keep going to that, because they don't want you to be happy. Because if you were happy, you wouldn't tolerate that kind of behavior. So it's a choice, and it's also seeing things as they are and seeing the material plane as the material plane is. And 3D, it's carnage. I mean, the most disgusting things happen on this planet, but also the most beautiful things happen on this planet. And the awakening process is a commitment. Earth isn't here to make you happy. 3D Earth. 3D Earth is here to awaken you. And what I see in a lot of clients is, how long they have been trapped in a loop, So like, is it 100 years, or is it 1,000 years, or is it 5 years, or is it 10 years? But it's a long time. And some souls even get tricked into coming into 3D, like they didn't. So it's especially, I'm hearing really loudly, especially with the divine feminine, being blocked on 3D Earth and is awakening now. So the divine feminine inside of us, not just outside, but inside. So we have a divine masculine and divine feminine balance inside of us. And the divine feminine is awakening in 2026. But, now we're also finding out that, Earth, we've been told, has always been free will. But there's a lot of trickery that happens, and souls get tricked into bodies on 3D Earth, especially high vibrational beings of consciousness. And it's usually some kind of trickery that, their beloved is, trapped, and then you got to come and you got to help, find them, and then they get trapped. So there's a lot of trickery, because the creation of 3D material plane, when it was created, was the ones that thought they created 3D, basically they see themselves as gods. So the Anunnaki see themselves as gods. They see themselves as the ultimate controllers. They see themselves as the ultimate power. And then they're not, because source is unconditional love. But these pretend gods that have been kind of running Earth for 2,000 years, everything is conditional. And what they really want, and what they have removed themselves by their own free will choice, is from their own source spark. So they need a lot of energy, and they need your energy as an empath, as a light worker, as a starseed, as a black sheep. And so I always thought, how do they know? How do they see an empath? It is so obvious. It is so obvious who an empath is and who an empath is not. So they do this one test for, you can test people to see like who the empath is. And if you're with a group of people, like drop something and see who tries to help you pick it up and who doesn't. And the person that doesn't, you'll notice that they never do, unless it's been pointed out to them and they need to prove that that they're not, like devoid of empathy. But notice who helps and who doesn't help. And then if they're helping, it's not for themselves, right? So a lot of narcissists, especially the covert narcissist, will act like they're helpful, but they're only there for enhancing their image. because behind closed doors, they are not that same person. Right. So that's discernment where, we start, as empaths, we don't lie. So we think nobody else lies. Every Draco reptilian lies. Their whole, everything about them lies. They are one big fat lie. That's all they do is lie, control, and manipulate. That's it. And so you can kind of go through the dark triad and go, okay, well, who's a psychopath, who's a sociopath, and who's a narcissist? But really, they're devoid of empathy, and their whole job is to actually confuse and destroy light workers. And that's their job. And they basically have to take over a human body, but somebody has to voluntarily leave their body for a reptilian to come in, because reptilians are not, they're entities. They're not, they're formless. So they have to find a form to live in. But you don't have to feel sorry. Like if somebody's a narcissist or a psychopath, you don't have to feel sorry like, oh, their body got taken over. It's like the more you do not give to the dark triad, then they basically, without your energy, they basically like evaporate. And so if you want to help the body of the person that a narcissist or the reptilian has taken over the body, the best course is to not give it any energy. And then as soon as they don't have any energy, they basically disintegrate. And that's what's happening right now. And that's why they're trying so hard to hold the frequency at 3D, because so many people are awakening out of 3D to 5D and landing in 5D, but also then they're trying to pull them to 4D. And then that's when we really need the technology decree and naming things, naming technology in source's name, and naming our space and sealing our space in source's name. So, because then the trickery kind of, we think, oh, we're out of 3D, but the trickery increases in 4D. And this isn't to scare anybody, because everything that they do, we can awaken from. And once you awaken and embody 5D, 5D is a frequency, a consciousness, and it's available now. And so once you are embodied and stable in 5D consciousness, then, they can't interfere with you. And that's why they get, that's why the psychic attacks get kind of bigger. But really, like even the psychic attack that I had in the pool that I talked about on Tuesday, that the woman came from my side. So this shoulder looks like somebody kind of took their nails and scraped it, like the burn actually like looks like that. So it's bizarre, but this shoulder, so same sun, same pool, same Alberta mountains, same Alberta sun, and this side is not burnt. The chest is not burnt. My nose usually would burn, but it's not burned. My chin, no. 2 places under my eyes and my third eye. And this shoulder where the person came over. So it can take a while to figure out, what happened, but it doesn't take that long. So yeah, I didn't catch it in the moment, but I caught it, right? I recognized what was happening. And I did get messages from my higher self. Like before, I got a message to get some sunscreen from my higher self. And then I would have had to go in my car, and it would have probably taken 15 or 20 minutes. But if I did go and I was like, no, I don't need to, because it's the evening at 6 o'clock. It's like late sun, so it will be fine. But if I went, the timing of that person, of that woman, and I don't blame her because I just feel like she was empty and taken over. I would have missed them, like I wouldn't have been in the same time zone as them. So our higher self is always telling us, but not loudly, the option. So, and there's a big difference between supporting somebody and and enabling them. So, yeah, it feels like it feels heavy, but we don't want to lose faith, right? Because that's what they want. They want you to feel like, oh, this is too hard and nobody can do this. And, the false light, the mimicry, the distortion, it's too much. And it's like nothing is too much for your source spark. Like nothing. Like your source spark activated means they can't even come near you. They can't touch you. They can't come near you. Like the frequency is too high. I'm just doing some releasing. So just remember that it's your frequency that they care about, the most, meaning the controllers, or they call themselves the architects. Or, I mean, they'd like us to call them God, but forget it. There's no way I'm ever calling them that. They're false, they're imposters. They're, really the name that suits them the most is the controllers. And that's, they need you, but you don't need them, basically. So, whew. So that's what's really come through. And I did it. I did it in a big way. So I can give an example that's coming through. If anybody wants to ask a question in the chat, it's time now, because usually the answer takes about 15 or 20 minutes. We started a bit late. So I started, I think, at 10 minutes, like 7:40 instead of 7:30. Takes a bit for the technology to come together. But it's way more stable. And it is, and I'm able to talk about these things that usually get you booted out, where they always get me booted out. But I'm able to talk about them because I'm claiming everything in Source's name. And I also say that anything thrown at this technology refracts back to Source. So I'm not handling anything. I'm just saying, hands up, basically. Whatever happens, I send it to Source, like I give up. I'm not going to fight 3D. I'm not going to battle 3D or 4D. I'm not going to play games. I'm just going to send everything to Source and let Source sort it out, basically. So, and they don't want that. That's the big thing that I see in sessions is they don't want you releasing things to Source. Just releasing a lot now through the hair. They don't want us releasing things to Source, because as soon as we release them to Source, then a lot of light comes through. And that happens, and they say it all the time. They say they don't want that. The negotiation is always don't involve Source, don't involve like, so with the big thing in activating our crystalline body, which is also called the diamond body. And it isn't somebody that can activate it inside of you. It is something that naturally activates once there's been a removal of interference. And that's why the decree is so important, because you at least can have a fresh start by removing what is not meant to be in your field, because we're carrying things for a long time that we didn't even know we were carrying. So the clearing and the removal at least gives you a chance to see, okay, well, what's in your system and what is yours and what isn't yours. simple. So simple, right? But but not in 3 and 4D. But it is when you're not in 3 and 4D, it is very simple. And it feels unbelievable. Like when I look back in 2000, when I was when I was stabilizing 5D in 2000, after 3 years of one-on-one meditation with Eckhart, he sat in one chair and I sat in one chair and I met with him every Tuesday. I was a good student, an excellent student. I wanted consciousness. I believed in it, and it was like a fire was inside of me to activate my consciousness. And I had a big pain body, very big trauma background. And Eckhart said, actually, I had the biggest pain body of anybody he ever met. It's not a compliment, but it was true. And 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 then at the end, 4D is so tricky. It's like, well, don't you want to be with your family, and don't you want to help your family, and oh, you're going to abandon your family and they're not going to awaken, but you're going to awaken. That's what I heard, and I told Eckhart, and he said, that's madness. You can't awaken others. It's like a cosmic law. And I was like, yes, I can. I can take the 5D consciousness and I can go into 3D and I can help. Can you imagine if it was that easy? A light worker lands on 3D Earth, awakens their light body, their diamond body, their consciousness, and then they go into 3D and then awaken in that frequency, and then they awaken others in 3D. I mean, the last 2,000 years of carnage would have like not happened if it was that easy. But 3D is so tricky because is it up? Is it down? Is it, you lose your orientation as soon as you're in 3D. And you're told how things are over and over and over and over again. Like what is school? Like what not just public school, but private school. It's the same process of repetition. This is the way things are. Don't think for yourself. This is what's happening. This is how this is happening, and this is how that is happening, and you need to memorize it, and then you need to regurgitate it back and tell us that you have memorized what we told you to learn. That's it. So yeah, if it was easy, and Eckhart told me it wouldn't work. I can't take 5D consciousness. And also my family, my siblings, I have 3 siblings and a mother, and they are part of the dark triad, and they have zero interest. If it doesn't have to do with drugs, alcohol, lying, cheating, and stealing, they are not interested. And that, and the obsession with money. I just they could kill for money. They're that obsessed with money. My sister said, I think I was 12, or she was 12, and we're a year apart, so 12 and 13. And she said to me when she was 12 or 13, or well, she was 12, I was 13. She said, when mom and dad die, I'm going to inherit everything. And I said, what? I said, we would all have to, me and my 2 brothers, I said, we would have to be dead. And she was like, not my problem. Like, as a 12-year-old, like, that's how they think. That's how the dark triad thinks. They have no empathy, and they are obsessed with money, and they don't care about human beings. They don't care about source sparked beings. They only care about the material, the money, their image, um, their reputation, public reputation. They have to have their name on a building, right? They can't just donate. They have to have a big billboard, donated by, Elaine Arson's on this big billboard. It's just- So, you know, money's not the problem. There's more than enough money on the planet Earth. There is more than enough resources for everyone on planet Earth. But obviously, it's not about money because there is more than enough. So it's about something else. And the something else is that it's about frequency and it's about energy, source, spark, energy. And those that have it, those that have never had it, that are made, and those that had it, but made so many decisions that made them go further and further and further and further. So they only have 1% source spark, and they call themselves the 1%ers. And they have the most money and the most resources. And, their family is on social media showing how, billionaires live. It's just like, but we could be like them too. Oh, yeah, you just have to give up your soul. Okay, so let's take a look at the chat. So I think that's it. Let me check. That's kind of what has been spiraling, you know. It's a spiral, right? Consciousness is a spiral, right? So as we look at things, we may look at them again and again, but it doesn't mean that we're doing it over and over again. It means that we're kind of seeing it and then moving like a spiral in consciousness. So we just need to have, faith in ourselves that if, and really, if I can awaken, truly anyone can awaken. And I've done the hard part where I've done it and then I shut it down and then I did it again, But the first time it took 3 years and the second time it took 23 years. So, but I'm never going to give up. Consciousness is all I care about. And then clearing the interference, awakening of consciousness beyond 3D and stabilizing in 5D is what I care about the most. And then you really can feel your heart. And then that's really when you start having fun and you start feeling joy because you are literally free of interference. And they really do not want you to feel joy because joy is your natural state. Unconditional love is your natural state. And then we start finding each other, and they don't want that. Okay, so, oh, well, anyways, we're here. So, okay, so let's take a look at the chat. So thank you so much, Helen, for being here. And then Sanija's here. Good morning, just woke up, still in bed. Sanija, 1973, she and her. Good for you, Sanija. I know Sanija, usually when you say you do a decree and it's like midnight or past midnight. So, you're a night owl, I know. Okay, so Sinija, plus they make school so stressful, it takes joy out of learning. Yeah, absolutely. Like the kids are so stressed out, they are killing themselves, literally. Like they are so terrified about their marks, so terrified about tests, so terrified about the teachers. And these are in good schools, right? Um, I don't know, air quotes, they're all the same. They're the same. It's all about keeping you in fear and keeping you in a low frequency so that they can, take your energy or feed off your energy. And then Maggie is here. Maggie Santana. Maggie S. Oh, yeah, Maggie Santana. Hi, Maggie. Maggie Santana 4392. Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And then Sinija says, yes, it's about Lush. Yeah, exactly. So that kind of wanting energy. Because if you think about it, like unconditional love is such a high frequency. And even, love is such a high frequency. But love has to be, I love you and you love me, respect, mirroring, respect. Love is not one person loving one person. It's not one-sided and then the other person disrespecting the other person. That's not love. That's mostly the love I've experienced, unfortunately, for me and my younger selves. But it has to be love mirroring love and respect mirroring respect. And, when we have guides of unconditional love that come through, they are so respectful, but if somebody comes in, like a fake guide, and they'll come in kind of off to the side, and they come in kind of slow, or they come in from behind, and they're kind of dodgy. That's not a guide. That's why I always say, guides of unconditional love, because a love that has no conditions, meaning the guide is going to put your highest and best interest first. Like, the guide is going to care about you the most. They're going to be in service to you. And there is nobody of the controllers in 3D and 4D that would ever put your interests first. So their love is not love, it is conditional. And any dark triad that you meet, everything they do is conditional. And I hear this all the time with a narcissistic or part of the dark triad parent. If you had one, you always financially owe them. You owe them for being alive. You owe them because you cost money. They chose to have you. They brought you in. They're siphoning off your energy. But they need to keep you owing so that they will always tell you that you owe them. But it might not even be like blunt. It might just be the worst, which is covert. They might infer, how much you cost, so you constantly feel like you owe them. Like, my mom would always tell me, if she rarely bought me anything, but if she did, and but our dad worked and our dad made money, so we weren't poor, but my mom would constantly, but she wanted me to be in that. She was part of the dark triad. She was a psychopath, and she wanted me to always owe her. And I had no idea my mom was a psychopath until I was 36. I just thought it was really difficult. And as an empath, I thought, well, you just have to love them more, and you have to do more, and you have to turn yourself inside out. But it was a trauma bond. It was a lie. It was fake. I created a fake mother so I could survive. And I couldn't face the way she was until, well, I did, I guess, with Eckhart a little bit in 1997, when I was like 27 to 30, but then I kind of shut it all down because it was too difficult to face. And then, um, and then, and then once my dad died, then it became really obvious because he was an empath, so he did a lot to kind of keep the family together. But then once he died, it was everything was revealed. So, um, but it's done on purpose when it's not like a brag, but when you're in service from source as a high vibrational being where you really emanate unconditional love and really believe in unconditional love, and you land in 3D, that promise, that essence of you, it gets kind of used against you. Like, you get, can't you try harder to help them? Or, oh, why are you being so judgmental? It's like, can you imagine, like, just saying what a psychopath does to children is judgmental? It's like, what? I'm not judging anybody, but these are the facts. right? But they're like, oh, well, you need to have compassion, for the psychopath. They were traumatized too. It's like, yeah, I was traumatized and I don't go around harming people, you know? I don't, I, if I would never do this stuff my mom did. Never in a million years would I do that, but she did, so why am I so special that I can stop, like harming children? I'm not, right? I would just never do it. And I'm getting 100%. So, but that's kind of the garbage of the 3D. They say these kind of spiritual things, or spiritual teachers say these things, or in religion, and it's garbage. You don't have to feel sorry for the perpetrator. You just send it back to the perpetrator, like energetically. And in the decree, we're sending back what is not ours back to the perpetrator, but not to the perpetrator. We're sending it to source. And then let source, God, source, divine presence deal with everything. But we need to release it in order for it to be healed and transformed, transmuted, and then updated in the records with Thoth. Thoth does the cosmic records in the Egyptian timeline, or the Egyptian expression. And I found that really, really shifts things. Sinija says, just looking at the chat, fixing up my hair because it's very emotional. Okay, so Sinija says, yeah, I've been groomed into that hierarchical system of owing that follows me even today, of having guilt and shame, having any extra money. Yeah, exactly. But once you have no money, the people that you help, that you enable, that you gave to, they will not give you anything. You're on your own. And that's when you really realize that it has been false, that, you have been on your own. And then when you need people, you, as an empath or a light worker, you're usually on your own, unless you have other light workers around you. Like when I went to Eckhart's event on Saturday, and I was with like 4 other people, and they're all light workers, they're all empaths. It was so joyful. There was no drama. We all like, took care of ourselves, took care of each other, and it was so easy. And we were all like, whoa, whoa. I don't think I've experienced it where I've been out with a group and all of us have been light workers or sensitives or empaths. It was actually quite shocking. And it was so harmonious. It was unbelievable. So, yeah. But, hopefully in 5D, that's kind of where as we're removing the interference inside of us, naming things as they are, false light, mimicry, distortion, all of those words. And then we're not giving our consent, like that we do not consent to any of that. And then we're connecting inside to our hearts and to the inner body. The body is like the compass that's trying to help us awaken to what is interfering with us that does not belong in our field. Always, be comfy. But it's really like holding your power, holding your own essence, and finally being like protective of your own essence, like your own being of source spark. And it is holding your power. Like even when you call in your guides of unconditional love and connect through the heart to the deep eye, to your higher self, you are claiming your power. And it's not hopeless. It's not hopeless. Even if you're in the worst dire situations, it is not hopeless. And empaths and starseeds can really get themselves into really hopeless situations, but it is not hopeless. And, they're there to make, the dark triad is there, or the archons are there to make sure that you don't awaken, that you don't feel your own power, with your connection to source. But, the more of us are in that state of consciousness of 5D, then it makes it, harder and harder. And obviously it's dismantling. And I was told from December 2025 that it is dismantling faster and faster in the next 2 years. So I feel like let's end here. So it's been an hour. Sometimes I go over, it just depends. But I feel like today was a big transmission. It was a big transmission in kind of connecting the dots of things that maybe we don't like talking about and that are so easy to talk about. But we're always in this work, we're connecting through our hearts, connecting to source, opening our hearts to source. And that is the biggest thing for starseeds and empaths, sensitives, black sheep. After having experienced so much harm, they have to rebuild themselves from scratch. And then how do they maintain an open heart? Right? Our hearts are the divine gateway to source, to wisdom, to unconditional love. And so just aligning ourselves to source consciousness through the heart and just bringing in the golden light from source through our hearts and connecting with our higher selves. And may our higher selves be fully aligned with source, guiding us with love and clarity. And the highest good for all. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one. As always, check in with yourself, follow your own discernment, ask questions. And then a final word in the chat. Cindy just says, thank you, Elaine, for your wonderful work and gifts. Angel, yellow heart, and a heart on fire. Nice. I love that, the heart on fire. Sending hearts back. And thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one. And Tuesday. If you're here, it's 11:11 a.m. PST. And anytime you have any questions or anything about the decree, just let me know, and can always ask on the lives as well. All right, take care. Thank you for being here. One last refresh for everybody. One last clearing. All right, take care.